We'll get started. So good evening, good day to everyone, and welcome to Careers, Life in Yale Must See Yale Show. The topic for tonight's show is Surviving Life's Wars with an ex-Navy SEAL, Jimmy Hatch, Yale College class of 2024. My name is Orlando Yarble III, a graduate of the Graduate School, a PhD in Genetics 2010, and I am a member of the Yale Alumni Board of Governors. And also a member is Yvette Rivers, who is here. Yvette and I are the new co-chairs for the Careers, Life in Yale Committee. And we welcome everyone joining us, alumni, as well as current students and guests. For those of you who are new to our series, this is our fall kickoff of Careers, Life in Yale weekly virtual shows that all facilitate the sharing of wisdom from alumni to alumni, between alumni and students, students to students, all aim to help with career and life decisions and transitions. We are so glad you can make it tonight, and we invite you to come back at any time for any of our weekly programs. And also feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or recommendations for other inspiring Yaleys we could invite to our show. And I'll put my email address here in the chat. Would love to receive your suggestions. There it is in the chat. A few notes before we get started with our program. We are recording the show, and this recording will be available on Yale's Vimeo channel if you want to watch it again or share. Please stay muted. I also want to thank the Yale Alumni Association staff that have helped to put this program together: Steve Bloom, Chelsea Gladeau, Kate Gustafson. Again, thank you to Jeff Feldman for cheerleading and even starting this channel. Finally, if you haven't already, I strongly encourage you to join the Yale Alumni Association's Cross Campus, our online community, 24,000 plus Yaleys. It's sort of like a LinkedIn for Yaleys, both alumni and students. And it's an opportunity to network with pre-vetted Yaleys and a great way to connect. And it's crosscampus.yale.edu. Okay, we are so excited to hear about Jimmy Hatch's professional and personal journey as a former Special Ops Navy SEAL Senior Chief, Master Naval Parachutist, and expert military dog trainer and handler who is starting his junior year at Yale. We'll hear about his Yale student experience after overcoming numerous life challenges involving combat, injury, depression, substance abuse. For the first part of our time together, I will facilitate a conversation with Jimmy, and then we'll open it up to the rest of you to ask questions on screen, or you can enter a question in the chat at any time, and I will ask it. Feel free even now to put your questions or comments in the chat. First, briefly, I'd like to introduce Jimmy. After nearly 26 years in the US military, Jimmy founded Spike's K9 Fund, a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting our nation's working dogs. And presently, an old guy, undergraduate junior in the Eli Whitney student program at Yale University, Jimmy has chosen to major in the humanities. We are honored to have Jimmy with us. You have kindly agreed to share with us your insight and your experience, and we are deeply grateful, Jimmy. If you would, please begin by introducing yourself, perhaps where you grew up, what were your formative experiences back then, where you were living before Yale. Let us know who you are.
Thanks, Orlando. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to chat. So let's see. I was actually, I'll get started really young. I was adopted a couple of times, and I was born in Virginia, but I grew up in Utah, and was in different kind of family situations there, and joined the military the day that I turned 17. I just wanted to, I grew up, instead of reading the things that I should have been reading, I was reading war books, and I just felt like the military was a place where I could, most of the relationships in my life were transactional. And so I just presumed that that's just how life was. And if I worked hard and did a good job, I'd get to be part of a small team that got to go do the really good stuff, which to me, the really good stuff was punishing people that were the enemies of decency. And that took me a while. I had some bumps in the road, but I made it. And I've been really, really lucky. I'm just a recipient of a lot of goodness from a lot of different people, and I'm just lucky to be here. So I guess that's the best intro I could give you.
Thank you very, very much. You've had big inflection points in your life. How have you navigated them?
Yeah, I inflection points. I almost had to look that up, Orlando. But hey, since I've been here at Yale, I think I got that figured out. At any rate, truthfully, the tough things that occurred in my life, I almost always had an example of someone not far from me who gave me the idea that I could come out the other side of whatever difficulty that I was involved with in an okay way. So a good example of that is I'm relatively close with Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who was, as you probably know, was shot in the head by a young man who had some mental health issues. She and I were friends before that happened, and when I got wounded in 2009, she actually came to see me in the hospital, and I did not do well. I was yanked out of my. I thought I was this tough guy, Navy SEAL team leader, and when I was hurt, my career was over, and my career was my identity, and I did not suffer that well. And I continued, and truthfully, I still do continue to have difficulties in life, like everybody. But what Gabby did, you don't have to look far. First, I'll say this: I've seen a lot of people get shot in the head, and none of them lived. Gabby lived, which is, it's just amazing. And then watching her work, her husband, Mark Kelly, who's now a senator in Arizona, he asked me to go see her in the hospital when she was in Houston. And I was there and I watched her, first of all, they said, look, she may not remember you. Her, she's very different visually. Please, know that she can't speak well, but she can understand everything that you're saying. So speak to her like you normally would. So I walk up the stairs, I get into her hospital room, and she remembered me. She waved, which made me feel really special. But then I watched her go to work, and she had to wear a helmet because she had part of her skull removed because it was swollen. And they were teaching her to walk again by playing music. There was a woman playing a guitar next to her, and she would move to the rhythm that the guitar had set. At any rate, I watched her just work. And she didn't go through Navy SEAL training. She hadn't been in a bunch of gunfights. She was just tough, man, and a hero in a different kind of way. And so that's just one example. I've had those my whole life. When I was a young guy in the military and struggled with things, there were people around me that just kind of, helped me, even if I didn't want them to. I think, the biggest transition for me was after getting wounded and then trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I for a short period of time, I felt like I really didn't need to be around anymore. Like I didn't really have any utility. I felt like I was, put here on the earth to do the job that I was doing. And that once that was over, I didn't really have much to offer. When I was first in the SEAL teams, I had an old guy say to me, look, man, in life, you're either an asset or you're a liability. You're either bringing something to the table, to your family, to your church, to your team, to your college, whatever. You're either bringing something or you're making it harder on the other people that are trying to do that. Now, it was fairly simplistic, but I took it seriously. And what I didn't understand is that no matter who you are, life will give you circumstances at some point or another that will not allow you to be an asset. And that's where we need to step in for each other. And essentially, the example of my buddies, guys who saved my life the night that I got shot up by covering open ground in a gunfight, which means they almost got killed themselves trying to save me. Those guys kept showing up afterwards. They weren't social workers, they weren't mental health specialists. They just kept showing up. They didn't know what to say. They just kept showing up. I was pathetic and hurting, and those guys just kept, coming by, and they let me know that they love me, and just by showing up. And I, at some point, through the depression and the substance abuse and the gun in my mouth and the police coming to my house, spending 6 months or so in mental health facilities, at some point I realized, look, I must have something to offer, because these guys wouldn't waste their time with me if I didn't. So I think the number one thing I would say is, at all the difficult places in my life, I've had people around me, sometimes people close to me, most of the time not, who, either by way of example or by simply being generous with their time or their wisdom, have helped me. I'm a humanist, and I believe that although we all have some bad in us, we have a lot of good in us too. And I think, honestly, that's the reason I'm here.
Yeah. When you talk about the people around you, and those that have been close to you, those that have maybe not been so close, but they've had an impact on you, how have you changed as a leader?
Oof. Well, I think, again, as I came up in the military, I looked at the people that I had respect for, who I believed were effective in leadership roles, and I tried to emulate some of those things that they did. But I think when I became a leader of more than just a couple of people, I started to realize that my vision of the capabilities of other people was very limited, and that I was, frankly, quite arrogant. In my world, if you hadn't picked up a gun and been in a gunfight in combat, I didn't really care what you had to say. And that's not very smart. So I think, and even more so now that I'm at Yale, and I'm not a leader of anything except for, I don't know, sometimes I lead my dog to the elevator so we can go out and go to the bathroom. But here at Yale, I think, I joke, it's not a joke, but it sounds like it when I say it, but I feel like my soul has been cracked open and exposed to things that show me the breadth of humanity, and that there's just so much that I don't know, and so much that I'm not familiar with. So when I do have something that I'm knowledgeable about or comfortable with, I try to be very careful with it, and try to make sure that everybody that's swimming that same direction, like whether it's my nonprofit or something I'm doing with a few classmates on a project, I try to make sure that everybody understands that I think they are value added and that I'm grateful for them.
Yeah. In addition to kind of that perspective where being here on campus has kind of opened you up, how has Yale influenced you more, either in that example or even in a different example?
Wow, Yale has really changed me. First off, I'll say this. I had ideas about Yale, and I don't know where the hell I got them. I mean, I'd seen some things in the news, and since I've been here, I see it. And because I'm a somewhat public person, I get calls fairly often whenever there's anything in the news about Yale, particularly if it's something that fits easily into this binary conversation that is simplistic and not worth anybody's time, truthfully. Yale is a very well-known institution, and I think sometimes it gets more attention than probably it deserves. And it's used as a lever to create political arguments, perhaps, or cultural identity arguments. But the first thing I realized was I didn't have a clue. And I was the first Eli Whitney student to be accepted into the directed studies program, which is essentially the classics and the canon. And when I start, these are the things that I should have read when I was young. But you know what? I'm glad I didn't. I don't know that I would have had the capacity to really feel the depth of those works. But the realization that I didn't have a clue about Yale, and that I didn't have a clue about my classmates, and I didn't have a clue about how I would perform in these situations where I was essentially scared to death. And just like the young people, I had, imposter syndrome, I guess they call it. Like, man, they're going to figure out how dumb I am here pretty soon. And they're going to ask me to leave, when I've turned my paper in and it's been written in crayon, it's probably not going to go over well. So I was, the only word I can really say is shocked. I was blown away at my classmates on Veterans Day. That first semester, I went to a lecture, and a young man who's one of my good friends, kid from the middle of Pennsylvania, Jewish kid, handed me a card that he had purchased and asked our fellow directed studies classmates to sign for me on Veterans Day. And I was shocked at that. But I was so overwhelmed with emotion that these young people would think enough of me to do something like that. That was really where I began to understand how special Yale is. And I really believe that. I know there are people that'll argue with me and say, well, Yale's messed up. And, maybe. But to me, in spite of its blemishes, Yale is an amazing place, stocked with amazing humans that want to change the world in a positive way. And truthfully, it's the exact opposite kind of work that I was doing previous to being here. My job was to get really good at destroying other humans if they needed it, and figuring out ways to find them and get to them and take care of them, and then get out safely, and keep my colleagues alive. So this is the opposite. I spend like 3 days a week. I go by the art gallery and I just sit there and soak it, because that's humans contributing from centuries and centuries and thousands of years ago. That contribution is really meaningful to me. And I believe that there's this, I've really learned this here at Yale. I mean, I had an idea of it previous to being here, but the connective tissue between, let's just take the Iliad, right? When that was written, the connective tissue, like, hey, look, we have running water and I've got Siri or Alexa but we're still fighting each other. We're still helping each other, defrauding each other, having arguments about who deserves what. We're still human beings. And I have a quote I stole from a friend of mine. He said, no matter how technologically advanced we are, we're still 5 consecutively missed meals away from being complete savages to each other. And I think here at Yale, I see a lot of us, I include myself, with gratitude, pushing in a direction that's going to make humanity better. Yeah. And that might look like it's sometimes my young classmates will say, well, I want to go into I want to go into finance, and people, but I don't want to talk about it. Look, I run a nonprofit. A couple things you can't be when you run a nonprofit. One, you can't be a socialist. 2, you can't be a peasant. People need to get out there and kick ass and create capital. Capital solves problems. Granted, it isn't always the best answer. It is a answer. But there's people here that are pre-med. There's people here that are trying to figure out ways to lead. And I think the humanities are a great spot for that leadership type stuff. Hopefully I didn't ramble on too much, Orlando. Feel free to interrupt me at any moment.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your words. Thank you. In the chat, I appreciate the comment there. Rob, would you like to unmute and ask?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Orlando. James, Rob Greenlee, SOM, MBA 83. Thank you for your service, first of all. I did a little bit of work with the Navy as a civilian, looking at what made the best commands different from the average ones, and so impressed with what it takes to run a good Navy ship or submarine or air squadron. Because when you're out there on your own, it takes leadership. And that it seemed like the chiefs were the ones that ran the ship, that ran the commands. Actually, you knew what was going on, but you were managed and led by the college-educated officers, the wardroom. Just wondered, now that you're at Yale, becoming one of those college-educated guys, what's your perspective looking back as a chief? Any leadership lessons learned for other college-educated folks going out there working with the folks who didn't have the privilege of education?
That's a really good question, Robin. I appreciate your kind comments about my service. I was very lucky. I had a really good time. And I'm really glad I got to serve. It was an amazing thing. To your question, I think the first thing I would say to my college educated, and I see some of my young friends from some of my classmates that I've had classes with on here, humility is important. Especially when you're in a position of leadership. And one thing that I think is extremely important is that we need to understand, and I got this advice once. In fact, I got this advice the first time I went on television from one of Anderson Cooper's producers. And Anderson Cooper is a good guy and his team is amazing. And this young woman, she said to me, listen, when you're on television, if you're trying to be someone that you're not, people will see it immediately. She said, as long as you speak from your heart, you're going to be fine, no matter what you say, because they're going to see that you're speaking from your heart. I think that's true in the military. I think, most of the best officers, college-educated people that were my boss, were humble, and they understood that a few of us had much more experience at certain things than they will ever have, because they spend a certain amount of time as a manager, a couple of years, and then they move on to something else. So the smart ones were humble. They were quiet when they first got assigned to us. And that's just speaking in general. Like, I've been on ships, I've been on submarines, flown in an F-18 in the backseat, which was amazing. But most of my time obviously was spent in the SEAL teams, and the SEAL training is rare in that it is the only special operations training where the officers and the enlisted do the exact same thing the whole time. So I saw the officers that I worked with, I saw them suffer. I saw how well they suffered and how they had to be in a leadership position. And if we messed up, they got punished. So we knew that we were all people who could suffer and who could fail, truthfully. And we also were very clear on each other's lane. And here's a good example. The best commanding officer I had, I knew that, say, let's just use uniforms and haircuts. That's a big deal in the military. You don't want to get in trouble if your uniform's messed up. You're supposed to look decent. You're supposed to have some self-respect and respect the uniform and respect, your unit, all that. Sometimes guys are lazy. They don't want to do those things. And who gets in trouble? The big guy up top sees that the little guy he doesn't have his stuff together. And so he goes to that guy's boss. So in my simplistic view, as long as I kept me and my crew within the lines, that left my CO room to not be bothered about stupid things that didn't really matter, but help us figure out how to get the resources and the training and invest our time the most proficiently, the most efficiently. because time is your most valuable asset. So if I could keep silly things from causing him to have to do stupid, I'm sorry, sir, I'll tell the men to get a haircut. Like that's just a complete, it's a ridiculous example, but most everything else could come from that. So I think we all realized relatively quickly that we would all have a better life and have a better chance of success on these missions where the enemy was trying to kill us if we just owned our lane and took care of it and let the other things, hey, when am I going to get promoted? You know, if I'm doing a great job, those things will work themselves. Not always, they don't always work themselves out, but by and large, the harder you work, the luckier you get, you know? I think once we realized, hey, look, this is your lane, crush your lane. And that makes it easy on all the other lanes. So we can get to where we need to go and do what we need to do. I hope that answers it.
It does. Thank you. Thank you.
Jimmy, I have a question for you. And others, please feel free to put your question in the chat or be prepared to share also. What makes you the most proud?
Man, I don't want to get emotional here, but when I can help my classmates, these young people are the future, man. And when I can bring something to the table that benefits them, I feel very proud. Doesn't have anything to do with being a shooter, being a Navy SEAL, or being a tough guy or any of that crap. It's me having something to offer these amazing people that I get to be with every day. And I see them. I see how hard they work. I see how much they care. I see how they struggle as they're growing up and being bombarded with all of the social things and all of, I mean, my gosh, I'm 55 years old. I can tell you right now, if I grew up with social media and I would be in prison. Like, I'm telling you, like, I just, they're amazing. And when I can help them in any way, make their lives easier or give them something that'll help them out later on, even if they don't realize it, man, that makes me proud. I'm proud that that whoever decided to allow me to be exposed to these folks that I'm with every day, my professors, the integrity that they use when they approach these subjects and my ability to learn, that is significant. And when I can do something that makes them know that they're getting through my thick skull, I'm proud of that too. But mostly it's helping my classmates.
Yes. I appreciate your answer. Part of me in that sees your reflection earlier when you spoke about those who contributed to you and kind of saw you and didn't give up on you and help push you forward. So thank you for sharing that. Dorian Rivers, hello. Would you like to share? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I wanted to thank you so much, as others said, for your service and your sacrifices. And I wanted to ask in terms of so Kyle Mullen, I didn't know him, and his tragic end. I think some of us can relate better to him as someone who, I mean, I wasn't captain of the football team either, but someone as a Yale student who, in pursuit of being the best at everything. I mean, that's when I think of Navy SEALs. It's just pushing yourself to limits that we can't even fathom. But I'm curious, and especially with young people probably looking at him closer in age to them, and when people come to you, you mentioned those interactions with students. What lessons have you taken from in terms of trying to be the best and that balancing, that there's a positive in that? I think that Yale students pushing themselves to be world changers, but that there can also be a destructive aspect of that. But I'm just curious in terms of your thinking about those things and those terms, your own lessons, and You know, how do you, when you see these people around you pushing themselves to different limits, what advice you might have, and really to any of us, of just of how you balance that, of trying to be the best. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Dorian. I appreciate your kind comments. First off, let me talk about the young man who was killed in SEAL training. You know, there are people killed in SEAL training every few years, and the conditions that he had are not uncommon. There are things that I know there's still an investigation going on, but there are a lot of things about that case that the public has not been made aware of yet. It's tragic for sure. But I can tell you from experience, the things that you will experience in combat make that training, which is very difficult, and they make it look like a day at the park. It's one thing to suffer in Hell Week and not sleep and be in the cold ocean and be competing and getting just beat up, you know, just doing the obstacle course, just getting, you know, your body just gets beat up. But your buddies aren't getting shot. You're not dragging body bags. You're not smelling dead people that are your friends. You know, that training has to be really hard. And I know it's not unlike what I was talking about earlier. You know, hey, oh, somebody did something at Yale, let's put it on the news. It's the same thing with the field team. Really kind of funny. I get it. You know, it's a high visibility place. But to get to the meat of your question, I try to be careful because truthfully, Dorian, these kids, these young people have been like, they don't get to Yale by just winging it. So like they have most of them, like I've gone to them and asked them, hey, how do you approach, you know, say writing a paper? How do you, and they all have these systems, and some of them are similar. So I'm careful to not try to stick my fingers in there and say, you should do this, because they're clearly more qualified than I am. Truthfully, I learned more about that from them. What I do try to help them with is not being afraid to look silly, not giving other people so much power over yourself, over your identity. Oh, this person doesn't like me, or this person doesn't like me, or this professor is not down, you know, with, as a kid, as a young person, that's a very common thing. I mean, we compare our insides to everybody else's outsides, right? I try to help them. And a lot of the students that I am close to, they're relatively confident, and they come from environments where they know that they are loved and that they are capable. But still, there are times when they struggle. And that's when I step in and say, hey, look, you know, this is just a small chunk of time. And yeah, did you mess up? Well, guess what? You're probably going to do that again. These are things that I need to tell myself as well. The one thing that I really try to help them with, and man, they don't care, is the sleep stuff, man. I don't think they realize how much sleep affects their ability to do things. And look, I know, believe me, I've been awake for over a week, and I know you hallucinate and you're really not making good choices. But in the case of the SEAL teams, sometimes you're awake for 4 or 5 days, and then you got to fight, you know. And you got to know where all your bullets are going, and you have to be careful and all those things. You can condition yourself to it to a degree, but no matter what, your ability to think clearly and your ability to perform physically gets diminished dramatically without enough sleep. And so, you know, I have these arguments, especially with my kids that are at STEM, you know, they have these problem sets, and they're like, I know I need sleep, but I need to get my work done, you know, and that's hard to argue with those kids, you know. But I guess that's really the only place I kind of try to give advice.
Thank you. Deborah, would you like to ask your question? I can also read it, but would you like to ask?
What was the most significant challenge of the many that you faced in your life, and what was the most important lesson that you learned from it?
Thanks, Deborah. This is really, really personal, and it's something that I still struggle with. But my biggest challenge is essentially believing in myself. So not having the ability to, because of the way that I grew up. Again, I mentioned that relationships were transactional. Hey, this, you're here because so you need to take care of your, that kind of stuff. And when I left to join the service, I was told by my family, hey man, you're never going to make it. So I just didn't think that I had the goods sometimes. And I went to SEAL training twice. First time I quit, the first time I was in SEAL training, I was in Hell Week, which starts on a Sunday night and goes till Friday. And the biggest guy in our class, I had done the Ironman. He was an unbelievable swimmer, just an incredible athlete. He got up and he quit. And I thought, well, hell, man, if that guy doesn't have any business here, I sure as hell don't belong here. So I quit, which was ridiculous. And then they sent me to a ship, which is like jail, except you can drown. I don't know why you people go on cruises. I don't get it. At any rate, I went back to SEAL training after a few years. I did a penalty lap, I call it. And I remember talking to this guy, and he said, "Look, man, how are you different than anybody else here? Really? Like, I've seen your run times, I've seen your swim times. You're one of the top 10 guys in everything. What is it that you don't think you have the ability to get through this? What is it? Where does that come from?" And I had, again, this is another one of those places in my life where this person didn't particularly care for me and didn't know me all that well. He was just talking about facts, why do you think you can't do it? So I remember coming out of SEAL training, and one of the really old guys, Vietnam vet guy, he said, man, when we look at the data here on what we put you guys through, and when we talk to you guys think you're done when you're really only about 60%. We as humans have a whole lot more in us than we think we do. And unfortunately, we have to get pushed sometimes to figure that out. But still, to this day, I struggle with that confidence. I'm not the guy who's going to walk into a room and think I own it. Hey, do I even belong here in this class today? You know what I mean? It's just a part of my nature, I think. But when it comes to actually executing on something that I feel important and strongly about, I don't struggle with that anymore. If my heart's in it, I don't have those doubts. But they were definitely there for a good part of my youth and young adulthood. So to sum it up, the biggest challenge I have is the battle I fight Jimmy against Jimmy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Please write a book.
I actually did with a friend, and he went to Harvard, and he gives me a relentless amount of crap for being a Yale, but he graduated top of his class, and then he went to Oxford, and I wanted the book to appeal to an audience like you guys. And it's called Touching the Dragon. I'll put it in here. But I'm going to write another one. And this one I'll write by myself, and it'll be better.
Thank you. Marie-Anne, would you like to unmute and ask your question? I can also read it. Thank you for placing it in the chat.
Sure. And if I were as humble as Jimmy, I would show my camera, but I'm not that humble. I'm just struck from the minute you started talking at your humility and just your way of even talking about the hard times or whatever, your kindness, but it's just a humbleness and yourself, but there's just no hubris, and you have so much of which you could be proud of, which you are and should be proud. That how do you cultivate that, maintain that, even being at Yale and all the success you're having all through your life? Was it people or events, or were you beaten down or something? And I'm just wondering, the humility. It's such a beautiful trait to have. And sometimes in such rare, it's you
Thanks.
don't-
Thanks, Marianne. I appreciate your kind words. I'm not always humble. I get cocky sometimes, and if I'm not quick to realize that I'm getting cocky, I'll be reminded by the universe shortly. But when it comes to what I was able to accomplish in the military, what I was able to accomplish in the special mission unit that I was a part of, and things that I was fortunate to do in combat, and even here at Yale, nobody's an island. Nobody does that stuff by themselves. And when I see people who beat their chest, and even if they're academics, and talk about how smart, or come across as somehow better than someone else, I that just makes me cringe. And look, I did suffer through SEAL training the second time when I decided to stick around. I did volunteer to go out and do some really tough stuff with regard to combat. And I did take the opportunity that I was given to show up here and receive a Yale education as best I could. But all of those things, each one of those particular things, I had people around me that were invested in me and that loved me and helped me. So I don't feel like I can stand up and say, I did this or I did that. I'm, some tough guy. That kind of thing is anathema to me. It's funny, like today I'm in a Dante class, and I love the classics, like I said, and Dante was a pretty cocky fella. So was Ovid. So I think it takes a little bit of temerity to do some of the things like write these epic poems and stuff like that. But even still, you were educated by someone. Someone helped you learn. Someone helped you learn to write and read. And he uses in the Inferno, and in the comedy in general, Virgil is his guy, and that was kind of his hero. So I guess where I'm going with that is nobody does anything by themselves. And if you think you do, just give it some time, man. Just go off and be by yourself and see what you can accomplish. It's just, and I think when we're arrogant, and I've been there, and we think we're superior in some way, we're really missing out, because that's going to turn some people that might be willing to help you, going to turn them off, where you're going to lose out on that opportunity. Oh, my dog just decided it's time for her to lie down on the couch.
Oh,
Good timing.
He's heard all these damn stories.
Thank you. Yvette, and then Kishan.
Thanks, Jimmy, and thank you for your service. So, your story is obviously it's amazing to us. It's not just a story of surviving, significant adversity, but really thriving afterward. I mean, I'm sure there are very few people in the world who experience the kind of, mental health challenges and, challenges with addiction, right? And then come back, not only survive, but, decide to then start a nonprofit to make, a difference in the world, and then apply to Yale. So yes, your story is very inspiring. I guess my question for you, and you've touched on some of it a bit, but if you had an opportunity to talk to someone who's experiencing the challenges that obviously you've had a lot of, challenges, but I'm talking specifically about more of the mental health and the addiction challenges after your service. And I know that people cared about you, that helped you, but what advice would you give to those people about how to get through that and not only survive, but figure out how to thrive? And some of the things I heard you say is, obviously, remembering that we all have worth and value in different ways, and that can change over life. That was one thing I heard. Believing in yourself, believing that, not thinking it's over when you have so much more to do in life, but what else? Like, what other strategies helped you and still continue to help you through what I assume some of that still lingers with you, right? What advice would you give to someone who's struggling in the same way?
So I'm actually going to write it in the chat. But this is something I tell people, and I have to tell myself this, because I think we forget this often. Treat yourself like someone you love. If you had a friend or a family member that was struggling with addiction or struggling with, you would care for them. You would go out of your way. You would stop what you're doing and you would say, hey, are you okay? And you would try to get them to come to a place, I can make a scenario where you help them understand how much you love them and how valuable they are and how they have so much to offer. I think take an example when you're hurt, when you're upset, what would you say to someone who was in your situation? What would you say to them that you love, like someone that you loved? How would you treat them? And why don't we do that for ourselves? And there are a lot of answers to the thing. And this could certainly turn into a counseling session. And I do have a master's degree in being a psych patient, so I'm very adept at that vernacular. However, it's really that simple. I would never say some of the things I say to myself to one of my friends, ever. There's a really good book. It's a little bit esoteric, but it's called The Four Agreements. It's really, really good. And there's some really good chunks of wisdom in there. But one of the things the author says is, look, humans are the only animals that punish themselves more than once for the same mistake. Like we can be pretty hard on ourselves. So I know at the same time, we do need to be hard on ourselves. We need to have discipline, and we need to make sure that we keep our excesses, the reins on them. But that balance is very important. And so I try to use that little saying, treat yourself like someone you love. That's an easy, quick thing that I can remember, and it helps me. And I've said it to a lot of other people as well. I'm on a team with people, and a guy makes a bad mistake, but he needs to understand that we can all make that mistake, and that there's pretty good chance that I'll make that mistake sometime, or someone else will, and not to get locked up on that, because we have work to do. We have things that we need to do, and we need to get past these things so that we can do what we're supposed to do. And the longer we hold on to those things, and the longer we stay angry at ourselves or ashamed, the less effective we are in doing the good things that we want to do. So I hope that's not too much, but treat yourself like someone you love.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you. We have 10 minutes together. Keyshawn, I want to invite you to please ask the question you wrote in the chat. Thank you for sharing that.
Hey, Jimmy, thanks for taking time to speak with us. And I just had a quick question kind of about the transition from being in the military to going into academia, or I guess being in college, I guess is really what it is. How was that transition for you? And how did you kind of deal with the culture change? And in the sense of two different ways. One being like, when you're interacting with teams now, how do you interact with them differently than you did, or do you, than you did maybe while you were in the teams? I assume military is a little bit more like direct, and that's not necessarily hierarchical in the teams, I guess, but at the end of the day, they're still going to listen to senior chief. But also just the general transition from a dynamic, like fast-paced unit to going to working in an academic environment.
Yeah, Keyshawn, thank you. Thanks for your question, and thanks for your kind words. I still struggle with that, man. I do know how I did things in the SEAL teams, and like with my nonprofit, God bless those young ladies that work. I have traumatized them. I don't do well with lateness, and sometimes I sit in class and the kid will walk in like 3 minutes late, and I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, like so that I still am trying, man. I'm still trying to be a little more laid back about this stuff, but I just think, look, man, your most valuable resource is time. When you come in late, you're wasting everybody else's time. It's disrespect. That's the way I feel about it. Yeah, that's some stuff you do in the military. But truthfully, I think if I were to break it out, and I knew how to do these graphs and put, specific descriptions around mission sequences, I don't know that things are altogether that different. We have in academia, you have a goal, and you have a bunch of them. You have small ones that lead to the big one. I want to pass this class, or I want to get an A, whatever that is. See where my standard is. I want to pass this stuff. But so to get to that space, I need to be focused on these things. I need to figure out what I can push aside that's not important and what I need to concentrate on. And so that type of focus, really, it's the same. And in fact, I think the military prepared me well for that. I certainly didn't have the academic chops that my classmates have. I didn't understand the system. I didn't understand how to take like my classmates have taught me how to take tests, how to approach tests. But when I first got here, I'm like, one, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to sit here and think about question number one until I come up with something. That's not the way to do it, right? So I'm continuing to learn, but ideally the transition, the language, like I don't get away with F-bombs. I don't try to, use those in general company. And that's probably for the better anyway. I don't know that I needed to use that in the military. However, I really think it's more similar than it is different. When you really get down to what matters, right? Like I have this goal, and these are the things that I need to accomplish to get to this goal. My goal in the military was to go out in these really difficult environments and execute a mission that was either to rescue somebody, to capture somebody, or to kill them. And I needed to do these things. I needed to be good at shooting. I needed to be good at communicating and making everybody understand exactly what was going on. And I needed to be good at, all those. So here's the same thing with class. I want to get this mission accomplished, which is for me, pass this class. And these are the things that I need to do. I mean, I get the handout, the syllabi, right? I look at it. This is what your quizzes count for. This is what attendance counts. And I'm like, okay, these are the things I need to do. And where do I need to put the biggest effort? Well, my essays count for a lot. So I really need to concentrate on doing a good job there. I don't know that it's altogether that different. It's certainly great to not worry about getting shot. Although, that's a really kind of a bad joke because that stuff happens in schools all over the country now, sadly. I guess a better way to say that is I'm glad that the consequences for me failing are not death or losing one of my friends, So, it bears saying your biggest fear in combat isn't that you're going to die or get hurt. Your biggest fear in combat is that you're going to make a mistake and get one of your friends killed. That's our biggest fear. And then later, when friends do get killed, you have survivor's guilt and all those types of things to deal with. But I guess it's kind of sorry to get off track there. I think it's really about goals and attaining those goals and figuring out how to prioritize your time. But man, I still can't get past people being late. I don't know what to deal with.
Thank you so much.
Jimmy, given that you did start Spike's Canine Fund, there are a couple of questions in the chat. Sarah Lee and Deborah, can we meet your dog or tell us about your dog?
I'm not going to mess with her because she'll be grumpy, but her name's Mina. She's a Dutch Shepherd. I got her when she was 11 weeks old. She came from Holland. The kind of dogs that I worked with when I was in the SEAL teams were similar, same kind of dogs. And I don't like not having a dog around me. They helped me so much in combat and saved my life so many times that I don't want to live without one. So She's 11 years old. She does a class with me. She's flown all over the country with me. She's done speeches with me, jumped out of the airplane with me about 10 times. She's amazing. I love her, but she's getting grumpier as she's getting older. And it's funny, man. Like we were in class today, and she rolls around and moans when she's sleeping, and I'm like, and, you know, if it really bothers people, they would obviously say. And I ask, "Hey, is she a pain? I won't bring her in." And nobody says that. I don't like her. So, but these dogs are incredible, and Mina just reminds me of that every day. And I need her, and I need to be her service human. You know, I was joking. There was a young man on the soccer team today. We were chatting before class. And he's like, "You know what? How does she really help you?" And I said, "Well, you know, let's put it this way. When you're really depressed, when you're really feeling badly, and she looks at you like, hey, I need to go out and go to the bathroom, or you're going to have to clean up a big mess. You have to go out and take her to the bathroom, because she doesn't care if you're depressed. You still have these things to do, and she gets you out of your head. That's a rough neighborhood. That's a rough neighborhood, your head. When you get in there, depression is a very selfish condition. Oh, I'm such a bad person. Oh, I messed this up. Oh, I do. Oh my. I didn't do good on my essay, whatever. Mina doesn't care. Mina needs to eat. She's got to go to the bathroom. She needs to be cared for. And it's a gift. And here's something else I want to say about, you know, these dogs. This is part of the reason I started Spice Canine Fund. And I put the link to the website. There's a little video in there too that kind of explains everything we do. But these dogs aren't volunteered. I volunteered to go to combat. The police officers volunteer to be police officers. These search and rescue folks, they volunteer to do that. The dogs didn't volunteer at all. They were born with a set of skills, you know, and we bring them into our human issues to help us so that we can go home to our families, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, having had my life saved by these dogs, I will spend the rest of, you know, my working life trying to help these dogs that we bring in to help solve human problems. There's no mass grave anywhere on the earth full of dogs put there by other dogs.
Right.
Humans do that kind of crap, not dogs. We need to take care of them.
Thank you. Thank you for leading the way. Thank you for the gift of this conversation tonight. Students, alums, friends who are on the YAA, the staff, thank you so very much. This concludes our conversation for tonight. Next week, we also hope to bring you points of view from more students or alumni, and please register for the Yale alumni events, and I'll put the link in the chat. Thank you so very much, Jimmy. Thank you so very much again.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Most welcome. Our privilege.